news and reviews, and today I'm reviewing Busta Rhymes' Extinction Level Event 2, The Wrath of God, Reloaded, long title, long album. And I am sipping on a Tona from Nicaragua. That is a lager coming in at 4.6%. Very refreshing and very mild as compared to the eccentric MC that we're about to get into. So let's get into it. Busta Rhymes is in the place, true indeed, and here he comes with the sequel to one of his best albums, Extinction Level Event, bringing back the apocalyptic end-of-world themes, and what could be more fitting for 2020 than to do something like that? And this is a really long album, so this man needs no introduction. Let's get right into the tracks. ELE2 intro starts off very much like the original with a voiceover that's talking apocalyptic themes and talking about the end of the world, but when the beat does kick in, it's very smooth and we can tell that Busta hasn't skipped a beat. And we've got Pete Rock on this track, who lets us know it's Pete Rock with his beat switch up. He goes into some pianos that remind us of his classic track, The World Is Yours by Nas. We also have a feature from Rakim on this, spitting some biblical lyrics. And this is just an epic way to start an album. This is a statement from Busta Bus at the very beginning. The Purge with alarm type sounds in the Swiss Beats beat. Busta gets very alarming with the lyrics and he gets right to the point. He says, "Sorry country, I know you don't want this really, but till we get us some justice, we fucking every city up. Drastic measures is urgent, the city burn like Philly blunts. Crazy like we jumping off the little yellow minibus. Strap Yourself Down, produced by Pete Rock and J Dilla. And let's just say it now, Busta was going all out in the production for this album. He has many of the greatest producers of all time on this. And we know Busta always brings it with his flow and his voice. And there's so many unique styles and flows and voices on this that I actually think, despite all the classic producers, that this album would still be good if it was just an album of acapellas. It would still be interesting at over an hour and a half of just Busta doing his different voices. And both his voice and his flow changes are on all their eccentric display on this particular track. The beat switches halfway through and he goes into a completely different style. Anyone in doubt that Busta could still bring it, and I was one of those that was borderline in that camp before this album dropped, he proved those people wrong with just this one track. Czar, produced by Rock Wilder and featuring M.O.P., although I don't really like it when they say it's featuring an artist when it's nothing but ad-libs or just a chorus, and that's all that M.O.P. is bringing to this track. However, their presence is felt because Busta, in all his many styles, is kicking a kind of M.O.P. style here. Very yelling, very energetic. There's a video for this one too, and despite all the energy that he brings of all the tracks on this album, this is probably not one I would have released as a single because other songs have much more substance, in my opinion. Out of My Mind, this one was produced by Busta Bus himself, and it has a very recognizable sample, that being from Bell Biv DeVoe's Poison. And I'm not a big fan of using highly recognized samples because most of the time it just makes me want to go back and listen to the original. However, he did get Bell Biv DeVoe to re-sing the chorus on this song, so that's an extra plus. And I get what he's trying to do because with the beat, he puts these drums out that make a very awkward pattern, and it adds to the variety of beats and flows that we're going to get on this album. It's basically just Busta showing off and showing that he can flow over anything displaying his technical ability. ELE 2, The Wrath of God, we've got some voiceover at first from Louis Farrakhan, and he's talking about injustice, and we've heard him voiced over on many rap albums. However, it is really fitting for this one, given the theme of the album about the end of the world and riots and protests and so forth. And Busta's coming through with some social commentary in his lyrics. He says, "Shit's kind of disruptive when I talk now, line up the subjects. I'm tired of injustice from the popes, politicians, and judges. When you witness the abuse of power, sometimes it's seductive. Then I question God, why create a creature that is so destructive?" Lyrics and imagery are really some of his best on the album on this particular track. Slow Flow featuring Old Dirty Bastard. And when I first saw the track list on this, I was super excited. Like, oh, did they find some old Dirty Bastard verse? Did they dig it up and resurrect it, and it's gonna be some unreleased material that we've never heard before? How fitting to give it on a Busta Rhymes album, but no. It is one of his classic verses from one of his most well-known songs, Brooklyn Zoo. It's more of a sample. I don't know if I would have said featuring Old Dirty Bastard, but these two, even though one of them's dead, have so much chemistry together that it is great that he put them here. And this is one of the standout tracks on the album. And it's funny, when Busta first came out solo, at first I was thinking, this is like an ODB type of dude. And the next thing I know, ODB was on the remix for his song Woo-Ha. So it's always good to hear them work together, especially since they're probably mixed into the top 5 most eccentric rappers in hip hop. There's a great beat and bass line by Nottz on this as well. And we get an extra treat from Busta on the second verse, where he's talking about a bunch of classic albums from Reasonable Doubt to Illmatic, Only Built for Cuban Links, Ready to Die, America's Most Wanted, all of these great classics that make up my top 25. And then he throws ELE 2 in on his very last line. So he is likening this current album that we're listening to all those classics. It's not quite there, but it is a good listen so far. Don't Go featuring Q-Tip. And this is probably my favorite beat on the album. And whereas we heard Busta on the MOP featured track going wild and energetic, on this track he completely smooths it out and just tones it down, just like his partner and frequent collaborator Q-Tip. And that's why I say we could listen to just the acapellas on this, because I don't know if I've ever heard an album with so many different styles from the main MC on it before. And he matches his guest star's energy perfectly. Both he and Tip are smooth and flow like lager on this one. Boomp, produced by DJ Scratch, who produced many of Busta's most well-known hits. And you can hear the chemistry on this between these two. And it kind of does bring you back to that classic Busta feel. Verbally, he introduces yet another style on this project, where he's bouncing back and forth between kind of sing-songy harmonizing and some yelling kind of loud type of lyrics. True indeed. And speaking of classic producers, he got the classic producer, DJ Premier Primo on the track, and Busta is inspired by the bass-heavy classic era sound, and you can tell because he proves that he's a master of syllables when he spits lines like this. The mathematician of this rap expedition mastered the precision of the faster addiction after you listen. Next track, Master Farad Muhammad. This is produced by Terrace Martin and Hi-Tek, and the list just continues. And this one also has the obligatory Rick Ross feature, and this dude is just ubiquitous, but I don't mind him being on this track this much, and his verse is adequate. They're always adequate, and I do like this saxophone-led beat. So this is a good song between Ross and Busta Bus. Na 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 you, na 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 you. This one's growing on me. This is catchy, but it's kind of annoying. When I first heard this was the first single, and I wasn't really excited for the album after hearing this. Busta does have a tendency to go commercial sometimes, and this had a little bit too commercial sound for me, even though I do like Anderson.PAAK most of the time. But Bus wasn't really doing much with the lyrics at all, and I just didn't highly anticipate this album. So when it came out, I was pleased to hear that most of it didn't really sound like you. And given the variety on the album as a whole, this song actually sounds good in the mix of everything around it. Oh No is the next track, and when we think about really long albums, there's almost always something that can be cut. This isn't necessarily that song because I like this. I do like the very dark beat that's going on here, although I think Busta could have done more with it given the concept of this album and how dark this sounds. He doesn't really hit it lyrically, and maybe that's the problem with this. So if you condensed this album some, I could see this track being included in a 10 or 12 track album, but for some reason, it just doesn't fit in the 22, 26 long track album. The Don and the Boss, yet another style from the dude, and we know he's had some Jamaican influence, and this is him getting his dance hall on. Best I Can, produced by Ninth Wonder, and what did I tell you? He got all of the GOAT producers. And this is a signature Ninth soulful beat, and Busta's inspired over it. This is probably his best concept for a song on the album, and you can tell that he speaks from personal experience, where he's talking about a man and woman who have split up but are still raising a son, and all of the complications that go with that. We've got the lyrical goddess Rapsody playing the woman on this track, and she brings the lyrics to this concept. She says, "I was so rude when you was trying to be a father. Always gave you drama, never took the kids to see your mama in them. I know the best I can is what you tried to do. Took so much time from you, tripping about the child support." And for Busta's part, he's also coming with the lyrics. He says, "I put up with your shit, but many times I swore I wouldn't. And did it for our son even when I get weak and thought I really couldn't." A very real track and standout for the album. Where I Belong, again, Busta has to have his commercial appeal tracks, and this one features Mariah Carey, and it sounds very similar to the big hit, I Know What You Want, and I would venture to say that's probably one of Busta Bust's best-selling songs, so you can't really knock him for trying to recreate that, but it's not really for me. Even though he does go double time with his spitting at the very end of this song, it's a cool parlor trick, and of course, not something that you're going to hear a lot in commercial rap, but it's not enough to make this a repeat listen for me personally. Deep Thought, there's a nice beat on this one, using a track that was also sampled by Eric B. and Rakim, but this is another love song on the album, and although this isn't really going for the commercial appeal, there's no chorus on this at all, it still doesn't add a whole lot to the album. The Young God Speaks serves as a transition between two songs, and I think this was done really well because it's using the beat from the previous song and part of the sample that we're going to hear on the next song, which is probably the most high profile track on the album, and this interlude works really well to set you up for that. And that track is Look Over Your Shoulder, Busta Rhymes, Michael Jackson sample, and Kendrick Lamar's first verse of 2020. What more do you want in a track? And K-Dot brings it immediately, putting this in verse of the year, or at least guest spot of the year conversations, displaying a stellar flow. He says, "My life is like 12 open mics of hopeless notes I write. For sure my folks unite soon as the flow get nice, the poltergeist. Just a great flow, doesn't disappoint at all. And not to be outdone, Busta Bus might say, hey, you're the king right now, but I am an all-time god. He displays a stellar flow also and has lines like, because I'm the god of the harder, the martyr, the father. I spit a saliva that's leaking the lava. Another standout track of the album. You Will Never Find Another Me. And of all the commercial sounding songs on this album, I think I really prefer this one. It features Mary J Blige, and she proves she's still got the chops here. She's been featured on many great hip hop songs, and this one really showcases her, I think. There's nothing really special from Bus, but it features the heart of the city and Mary just going off. It works. Freedom is a very somber track and gives Busta a chance to kick some of his most poignant lyrics on the album. Again, talking about injustice. He says, can't imagine them parents coping in they arms with the breathless body they holdin'. God bless the tear of every mama crying. Children leave the house wondering if today they dyin'. Some of his best lyrics on the album and a very thoughtful track. Satanic. This is a good way to end an album with this kind of theme, and I like the concept. I like the dark beat. Busta does border on some conspiracy theory, Illuminati type stuff. It's hard to tell if he really believes that or if he's just trying to fit in the concept of his album, but it's still interesting lyrics that he's kicking to close out the main part of the album. Blowing the speakers. Now we're getting into the bonus tracks, and Murder Beats on this one provides a very bouncy, different style than we've heard from anything else. And flow-wise, this is like Busta Rhymes' version of mumble rap. I haven't necessarily heard him do this before, although it's not that interesting. It is better than mumble rap because it's him. Who Are You? This track uses some effects, which the man with 1,000 voices doesn't really need, but they're on his voice, and there's nothing special about this song either, and you can see why they were probably cut, this one and the last one, from the original. Hope Your Dreams Come True, and this is actually one of the bonus tracks that I could see fitting into the original. I might have cut some other songs to put this one in, and this has a slower piano-based beat with Busta Bus rhyming very fast over it, so a nice juxtaposition there, and this one works. Calm Down. This is the Shady collab, and it's old. It has been released before. This track uses the House of Pain Jump Around beat as the basis for its instrumental, which brings up 2 points for me. Number one is Busta has used a lot of really recognizable samples on this album, from Belle Biv DeVoe's Poison to the Michael Jackson 5 sample to the Eric B. and Rakim to this, and I'm just not a big fan of that because you can't make something in your own right that was so large and popular before in most cases. Number two, I know M and Everlast had beef, and I'm not sure if that was completely ever resolved, so it's kind of strange that Slim would want to come and jump on this verse from Everlast's most famous song, and that Everlast would really allow that if he knew that Eminem was going to be on it. Of course, at this point, he probably didn't care. He'd probably just sit back and make some money off the royalties, selling the sample, whatever. It's fine. He's laughing, getting richer. And I know this is old. It was recorded previously, but M does use the F word on this, which detracts from the entire verse. And I'm kind of surprised that Busta would put this on an album in 2020, even though it was recorded in 2014, I think. Nevertheless, M does give us some classic Slim Shady type of verse with a high-pitched voice and some of the darkly humorous lyrics that he included on his original albums with lines like this. He says, "Hey, Mrs. Abraham Lincoln, other than your husband's fucking brains that were leaking, how'd you think that play was this weekend?" On ELE2, Busta came with it. He did not phone it in. He had a bunch of different voices, styles, flows, a classic producer list. If you listen to this for nothing else, listen to it for DJ Premier, Nottz, Ninth Wonder, Pete Rock. It's really amazing that he could come with so many different flows and different styles for a rapper that is damn near 50. Also, this deluxe version, we don't hear a lot of albums that are that long in this day and age, but you can tell that it's a good listen because it doesn't feel as long as it is, although I might have cut a few songs. And that's a sign that most of the tracks are banging, and it's a throwback to the era that Busta originated in. All that being said, I'm recommending this album, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of a 12 pack. Thank you for watching my review of Busta Rhymes Extinction Level Event 2. If you liked this, go ahead and hit like now and hit me up in the comments. You can also subscribe to my channel. The link is popping up right now. And there's some other videos that I've done that are popping up on the other side. I drop hip hop and hops related content consistently. So I look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, keep buzzing.